Make sure you don't miss a thing. Go to starzology.com/newsletter and sign up. Welcome to the Starzology Astrology Podcast. I am your host, Alison Price, and I'm here with my good friend and co-host, Arwynne O'Neill.
Hello, Alison. It's great to be here with you.
Thanks so much for you joining me one more time. So in this episode, we're going to be talking about the third house.
Yes. Third house is an awesome one.
An awesome one.
Yeah.
We've spoken about several of the houses already, and I can probably put a couple of links to some more episodes below in the show notes.
Yeah.
And for those who don't know, so in astrology, in each chart, there are 12 houses.
Yeah.
And from 1 to 12, and we all have all 12 houses. And today we're going to be zooming in on the third house, which we all have, and talking about some of the major themes for the third house.
Yeah, and this is the natural house of Gemini.
Yes, it
which
is.
Fabulous. It's an effervescent and bubbly sign of communication and lightheartedness, and it rules what it rules everything you have two of, right? So the hands, the eyes.
So with the third house, let's just start off with a couple of some of the themes for it. So particularly, let's start off with the people. So it's your siblings, right?
Your siblings are your nearest neighbors.
Yeah, so with your siblings, that's your brother or sister.
Yeah.
And it's also your first cousins who are on the same generation as you. They're in the third house too.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah. So, and I always thought this was interesting because when I started learning astrology, I looked at my third house and I've got Mars and Venus in the third house. And I've got one brother, Mars, and one sister, Venus.
Amazing.
I thought, gosh, this astrology lark's clever. And I went with that for a long time before I realized, okay, it's not that you won't have siblings if you don't have planets there, but if you do, they represent the actual people, the actual siblings that you have.
Yeah.
So do you have any planets in your third house, Arwynne?
I've got Jupiter in the third house.
Yes. And do you have siblings?
I have two half siblings.
Okay.
So I didn't have them until I was in my teens.
Okay.
My dad remarried and has, two sons.
Okay.
So they are both musicians. They're like 12 and 14 years younger than me.
Oh, right.
So, yeah, they're now going through, one of them is just getting, they're pregnant with their first child.
Oh.
So that's adorable. Yeah.
So it's going to be Auntie Arwynne.
Yeah. Yeah. The other one got married 8 years ago or so. So, yeah.
Okay. And would you say either of them are represented by Jupiter, or do you not really know them that well?
I mean, that's a great question. I know them quite well, digitally. Literally.
Because they don't live in our city.
No, they live in Ontario, which is a good 3,000 miles away. When I was a kid, I met them over the summer and Christmas breaks. So we've probably literally met less than 20 times in person, which is kind of random. But yeah, it's my Jupiter is in Aquarius, and my third house is split between Capricorn and Aquarius. My dad is an Aquarius, so I think he's definitely represented by that fourth house cusp.
Okay.
But that Jupiter being, the dad's children and that part of it. Also, of course, the third house is communication, and my life is all about communication. So that's where I see that really coming into play, is less about the siblings and more about my communication.
Yeah. And as you said earlier, the third house is also about your neighbors.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, right.
So
the neighborhood, your neighbors. Yeah.
The neighborhood. I mean, the guy next door. I mean, who we live in an apartment. I haven't seen the guy on this side. I've only heard them. But the guy on that side, I've seen probably 3 times in 8 years.
Yeah, our floor is the same way, but we do have a building that. I mean, you and I live in the same building.
And we never see each other.
We never see. No, exactly. When we met, it was outside of the building, which is hilarious. We can tell that story again, which anyone who is a fan of the podcast will be like, oh, again, now you can go get a coffee or something. But yes, the way we met, 10 years ago, maybe even more 12 years ago almost, I applied for, or not applied, what's the word, answered one of those, what was it?
I was doing a meetup.
Meetup.org. And it was an astrology one. And I was like, I should meet some people in this city. And so we went to this meetup, and we were literally the only 2 people there. And you had organized it. And so at the end of it, after an hour of, wonderful conversation and talking about
just like today,
talking about astrology, we left and we started to walk home, and we both are walking in the same direction, and then it started to get weird because we're like,
crossing the road.
Only a few blocks away from our apartment, but literally we're like, oh, do you live in this direction? No, me too. And then we're like literally going to the same building, which is hilarious. Like, oh, we're neighbors. So yeah, we're neighbors. Exactly.
We are neighbors.
And we met through astrology exactly,
yes.
And now we're having a podcast together.
Yes. Well, and podcasts.
Yeah,
I think
podcasts
are fit in the third house, I think, because 100%. It's communication.
Yeah.
We haven't got, so communication is definitely a third house thing, how you interact with the people around you.
Absolutely.
And we've done podcasts before.
Yes, we had 50 some episodes back in the day.
Did we have that many?
About 50, almost exactly 50. And now we've had over 150.
150?
Yay!
And the conversation continues.
Yeah, and exactly. And I mean, if you look at all of the astrology podcasts out there
that have come and gone,
having 150 actually puts us in kind of a class by ourselves.
Yes.
There are many of the daily variety that have.
They're just horoscope podcasts.
But then there's a lot of them that come and go, and even
they do.
Even some of the big name ones, they're like,
after
50 or so, they're done.
Yeah. They call it pod fading.
Pod fading.
Yes. Because anyway,
they fade away.
They do. They had their moment in the sun.
Yeah.
And here we are. Imagine if we kept going from all those years ago. We'd be at like 10,050 episodes. I mean,
we would be
and still
find
talking.
Something to talk about. But no, maybe we wouldn't. Maybe we would just, we'd be like, okay, so what does Neptune, the sextile Venus in the third house mean on the next episode? Tune in.
Yeah.
That'll be us in 10 years.
But it's amazing because apart from that, we don't really interact in general. It's just really the astrology brings us together, and we've got a lot to say about it. So this third house, you've got planets there, I've got planets there, and we are both actively producing words and putting them out there.
Yeah. I would say we both feel like third house people.
Yeah.
Because I've also got the North Node in the third house. I don't know about you.
Right. Oh, yeah, the North Node, that's a good one.
Yeah.
No, I don't have the North Node there. I've got yes, I do. I'm lying. Yes.
We both have the North Node.
We've both got that's the thing we've got in common.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I've got the Mars, the Venus, which, as I say, was my brother and sister, which I thought was great.
Yeah.
And then the North Node. So the destiny is to share the information, to teach, which I have taught for, 12 odd years or so.
To distill the vast amounts of knowledge and travel and all of that stuff that you have amassed from the ninth house past into speaking to your community and distilling it into bite-sized pieces that people can understand.
And that's you, dear listener, yes.
Yeah, exactly.
So if we resonate with you, then you're still here. So that's great.
For sure.
So that is one of the other things about the third house. Yeah. And then we have this thing about short travel, don't we?
Mm-hmm.
So technically, short travel is third house and long-distance travel is ninth house. But what is short travel? So back in the day, it used to be how far a horse could go in a day, which is just apparently 50 kilometers, give or take.
What is that in miles?
Well, I don't know. Who does miles? So anyway.
Half of our audience is in the US.
Are they? Well, anyway, you'll have to work it out. I don't know. You get onto it.
Oh, my God.
So anyway, so this is why even in England, you've got staging coaches and they go as far as the next stage because the horse is dead by the time they get to that end.
My
then they change horses and go on to the next stage. So this was a specific measurement.
Wow, that's insane.
I know.
That's 31 miles. So
yeah, so I don't know if the horses of today can go that far. Or,
31.
I don't know. How far does a horse go?
I don't know.
Well, they can definitely trot along, can't they? If they're riding all day. Da-da-da-da-da-da-da.
Yeah. But 30 miles, that's a lot for a horse.
Well, maybe it's longer.
50 kilometers. No, 50 kilometers. That's 31 miles. Wow. That's, yeah.
So,
I guess if you're crossing an entire continent and you're, packing all of your wagons, is that an unburdened horse? That's probably an unburdened horse.
Well, no, it's like the stagecoach. How the West was won. They're just walking the horses with a carriage behind.
So they had a couple of horses probably pulling it.
But these horses can only do one day, and then they've got to have a break, and they get fresh horses at the next staging post. So that's why these towns were built where they were.
So you just trade in your horses for different horses?
Yes. You don't keep your horses.
What? You don't get attached to the Did they not?
Who knows what they did? But that's why it's that far, because if you were just having to go,
Yeah.
your horse couldn't. You had to.
No, of course. For sure, yeah.
I suppose you could keep your horse. I don't know. What did Jesse James do? He must have kept his horse.
I mean,
Hey-ho,
he didn't have a
Silver.
stage horse. He had just a horseback with, like, I don't know, a backpack or who even...
Anyway,
but apparently we don't watch enough Westerns.
Well,
How
we
is
don't
that
know.
possible?
Well, because
There's
we don't
nothing
have...
but Westerns.
How far can you go in an Uber in a day? How far can you go on a tank of gas?
There we go.
Yeah.
Tank. That's
So-
the modern horse, for sure.
So the point being that short journeys that you could do in a day
Yes.
are third house. So this is your weekend away.
Right.
It's just going down to Harrison Hot Springs or going up to Whistler. That's your short thing.
Yeah.
But once you cross international borders, if we went down to Seattle, then it's ninth house,
Yeah.
even though it's the shorter distance.
Yeah, for sure. Bellingham, kind of a gray area. But...
Well, no, once you cross when you cross the border. Oh, I see.
Yeah, joking.
If you can get through the border these days,
my goodness. Yeah, really.
then it would be a ninth house travel.
Yeah.
But if you just do a weekend away here or a weekend, or you go to, I don't know, where do we go for weekends? You say you went to Whistler.
Yeah, or Whistler. Yeah, so if Canada becomes the 51st state, we're not going to talk about politics, but I just had to throw that in there. That was
But if we go from here to Toronto, that then is ninth house because you have to get on the plane. And
yes,
so,
definitely.
The horse couldn't make it.
No, definitely not.
So maybe, I don't know, we'd have to look into that and find out how far can a horse go. But I think back then, the horses were bigger than they are today.
Yeah, the horses today are just so pampered and coddled. They don't know what an honest day's work is.
For those of you interested in a little more, I'm now offering online astrology seasonal sessions. So there's one session in each of the solar seasonal mid-months, which will be February, May, August and November. I'll be chatting about advanced astrology topics through a Zoom presentation. If you're interested, check out the link for my seasonal sessions in the show notes below. Now back to the episode. But this is how they came out when they came out towards California. It was the same thing.
Yeah, come on, totally. Well, they didn't have the stagecoaches and, all of them, until they built it up.
I don't know.
You have the Donner Party and you're having to eat people and whatnot.
Well, anyway.
Yes, exactly. Or horses. I don't know. There's a lot of terrible things that happened in this.
Oh, we'll have to. I'll definitely have to Google it and find out how far can a horse go in one day. Then
yes,
that's gonna be our new.
Or maybe it'll be how far can an Uber go in one day.
Well, yes, which is probably
upgrade that. Yeah. Modernize.
So that's really it. So you've got the communication, you've got the travel, you've got the siblings.
Yeah.
We've also got the neighborhood.
Yeah.
Which is to do with things like the local school, the local library, where you go to your post office, where you can walk from your home.
Yes.
So,
the local pub.
The local pub. And it's called Your Local, right?
Yeah.
So, when the kids were young, we would have the local school. And then we got the high school, and then we've got the Cub Scout Hall and the
lodge or whatever.
Yeah, the PTA hut or the Girl Guide. I don't know what they went to. The karate session, and and all of those neighborhood things. So everything you do within your neighborhood, is represented by the third house, and the relationships you have with your neighbors. Are you arguing about the fence lines,
right,
or not?
Yeah.
And are we going to chop down the apple tree because it's or whatever? All this sort of thing is shown by
zoning.
Yes, yes, and So another theme for the third house is your early schooling. So this is when you were a young kid and you went to school up until about the age 12. How was that schooling? How were your teachers?
Right.
How did it mold you into who you are today?
Yeah.
What were the influences?
Right. And this is where maybe learning, not disabilities, but learning issues might occur. Retrograde planets or difficult planets. If you have Saturn in the third house, that could mean that you had trouble learning communication, or that you had some sort of maybe dyslexia, or maybe something like that hampered your ability to keep up in school, and you needed extra help or something like that. And yeah, like issues with early schooling and lecturing and public speaking, maybe speech issues, difficulty in communicating, and yeah, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and whether you were on the debating team or the
Right.
hockey team or
Right, totally.
or
Yeah.
we both got planets there. What team did you play for? I
Yeah.
played netball. I was wing defense. I wasn't much good.
Amazing.
I'm telling you. And I think back now and I'm thinking, how did I get through it?
Wow.
But you had to, in the school I went to, you had to be on one team or another. So it was either swimming or netball at that stage, which is like similar to basketball, I think.
Yeah.
Anyway, we played this and we had to play the local school and then the school down the road. And
Good for you.
I know.
I avoided sports like the plague when I was in school.
Really?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And then I went to sort of an alternative hippie-ish school where I was very much involved with like philosophy, and I was in sort of the AP program, which is
what does AP mean?
Advanced placement. So
Okay.
it's kind of a nerd-ish.
Well, don't forget the codes come in there.
Yeah, I know, right? Yeah, so we had a kind of elective class where we studied science fiction in futuristic sort of science fiction in literature and in movies. And so we did this whole elective thing, and that's very much, I think, a sort of a Jupiter in the third house situation.
And the North Node.
And the North Node, yeah, exactly. Futuristic sort of stuff. And I'm definitely like a science
exploration
fiction fanatic.
And your love of science fiction and whatnot.
Definitely. Yeah, definitely. So that was definitely a big third house thing for me. And we had to write our own little short stories and wrote some excellent little short story science fiction things that
it's all there. It will come out.
Yeah, and I mean, my best friends were actually, it was kind of funny because, of course, my name, Arwynne, it's from Lord of the Rings. And when I started my school in high school, I changed schools from 9th grade to 10th grade. And when I had to like be introduced to my class, this guy stood up and he was like, "Arwynne, the daughter of Elrond," or something. And I'm like, oh God, it's so embarrassed. And I'm like, yeah. But then we ended up being best friends and, dating briefly. And yeah, so yeah,
wow.
that science fiction third house thing opened some doors for me.
Well, this is it. So how would you say your early schooling was? Were you a keen little taking an apple for the teacher or not really?
Oh, no, yeah, for sure. Yeah, I was definitely. And, I had some subjects that didn't agree with me. Math didn't agree with me. Chemistry didn't agree with me. Although I love chemistry now, but I mean, and also, yeah, it really depended on the teacher, as you say. Like, if I loved the teacher, I wanted to pay attention.
Yes.
And so as a result, like, even though I could not give a whatever about geometry, I had a hoot. I did really well in geometry because I loved my geometry teacher. He was a fantastic teacher, and I still have very fond memories of him to this day. And so, philosophy I did great because it's just stories and thought experiments, and it's funny. I have all my grades from my teachers, and every once in a while, I'll stumble upon them. Because I went to like this weird, very small private school where, and not private in the sense of like, we weren't like rich or anything, but it was a hippie school. It was a sort of alternative little school. Okay. And so the teachers would write like a whole paragraph about you, and because the classes were so small, they could do that. And most of my classes, it was like, Arwynne really needs to speak up more. And when she does, she contributes something that totally changes the tenor of the class and everybody benefits. And she needs to speak up more. So my whole life has been,
speak up more.
Exactly. And here I am speaking up.
Speaking up finally.
Yeah.
Speaking up more, yeah.
But that for lost time.
Yeah. But what you learn in those early formative years, I think, is so important.
Yeah.
And what you were exposed to back then.
Right.
Not that I would ever touch a netball ever again.
Yeah.
I mean, but these are the memories you have as when you were a kid at school.
Totally.
And I was thinking, my brother and I did we lived in a small village, and we did a village newspaper because we were so busy nosy parkering about next door's cat and whatnot. Yeah. And we used to print it out and then stick it in each the neighbours' letterboxes. until my father said, stop doing that.
A primitive form of podcasting.
Yes.
If I dare say.
And it was like a newspaper.
Oh my God, that's amazing. Yeah. Actually, oh my God, I wrote a comic book for my mother and my grandmother.
There you go.
Like, there was no one else to read it, but I literally wrote a comic book, and I would staple it, and it would be, this huge fanfare of like, the new issue is out. Oh my God, I forgot about that until just now.
Yes.
That's hilarious. At first it was just based on like characters from TV, and then when I started reading actual comic books, then they all got superpowers all of a sudden. Yes. But it was very soap operatic. There was lots of weird kissing and,
of course
lots of strange relationship drama.
But also, I think with this third house is libraries, right? Your local library. Now, growing up in England, we went to the library every 2 weeks because you could keep a book for 2 weeks. You got 2 books for 2 weeks. And my dad and my mother and the whole family would go and get books.
Us too, totally.
And you'd read everything on the whole shelf.
I still go to the library to get graphic novels. Because as we've talked about the Libby app, shout out to Libby app. If you listen to a podcast, you probably like audiobooks as our audience members.
Is that only in Canada though, that Libby?
Oh no, I think it's.
Oh, is it? I don't know.
Hopefully it's universal, but if not, shout out. Anyway, the Libby app. It's like you can download free audiobooks.
You got me onto it.
Yeah, it's amazing. But I've always gone to the library. Like ever since I was a little kid, I've always loved the library, and I still. I
had a bag that was for the library books.
Yeah, I just use my cooler backpack, which is like it carries my my Verve vodka sodas or gin soda, whatever is in the summer, and it carries my library books in the winter. But yeah, I still go for the graphic novels, which the audiobooks of those are, you can't.
But this is the thing. These are things that you learned, or one would have learned up to about the age of 12, because it's that early schooling about what you did in your neighborhood. Yes, we went to the library. That's what you did.
Totally.
You read books.
Yeah, exactly. And when I was, like 20 years ago or something like that, when I cut the cord on cable and stopped getting cable, I would go to the library and get movies. And TV shows and TV series and watch them at home on DVD.
It was, there was a summer I actually worked in a library when I was a kid, because back then you had to just press the thing,
Yeah.
But we are readers, you and I think.
Yeah.
We
I
definitely
worked in the library in 7th grade. I had a whole period where I was like, I didn't have to go to class because I worked in the library. Yeah. Amazing.
Yeah. So these are all, and honestly, I think really, perhaps what you did as a kid is not always relevant if you're doing an astrology reading for somebody, but it does show, the sorts of things that they were exposed to earlier on that set your path, that set your thing, right?
Yeah, definitely.
If you want to be a hockey player now, you have to have been playing hockey when you were 2, right? So, or if you want to be a pianist, you have to have been playing piano. You've got to just pick it up when you're 20. You've got to have been, and Tiger Woods was playing golf, you know.
Which is not to say it's ever too late. You can. It's just so much easier.
It's never too late, right?
It's never too late.
She said learning Arabic. Yeah.
Right. Oh my God, exactly. But yeah, it certainly helps, especially with, other languages and music and all that stuff. It really does help to learn early. Mm. But yeah.
But I do think if you do have planets in the third house, as we actually do, you tend to, things were set in place because you were here, there, and everywhere.
Yeah.
Doing things with the school, whatever it was. I was a girl guide back in the day, and all of this stuff. You went, and I used to go to karate lessons. Can you believe it?
Yeah.
You exposed to all these things.
Yeah.
Riding horses. There's another thing.
Yeah.
Not that I don't know how far they go in a day, but when I was, used to ride horses. It was what we did. But so that does show activities in the third house, and these planets will show a busy childhood, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, that's
but we're having to dredge our memories, Arwynne, to dig this stuff out.
We're like, oh my God, right, the library. That's true. It's hilarious.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when we look at things like communication style, which is really what comes out of the third house, depending on the planets that are in there, it will show a different type of communication style. So we thought we'd just go through a couple of the planets.
Yeah.
Arwynne. So if, for instance, you have the sun in the third house.
Right. And I would say that communication would be very important to that person.
Yes.
Your early childhood would be very formative, which is not to say it isn't for everybody. But for some people, some people you talk to, they don't even remember their childhood. They're like, I don't know. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Some people feel like they were just hatched at puberty. But yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah. So
I think it's very direct, and it's confidently communicating.
Yes. Yeah, naturally.
Yes, they're naturally able to just express their opinion, because why wouldn't they?
Yeah, there's not a lot of conflict. It's your core personality is aligned with your communication style.
Yes.
And then the moon, maybe your mother was a writer or a communicator in some way, or
it's emotional now, you see.
Yes, exactly. Emotional communications. That's a really good point.
If you don't eat your peas, you'll make me feel sad. Yes.
Yeah.
So
if your partner has their moon in the third house, or if their moon falls into your third house, these are something that you'd want to look at in your synastry chart with your partner.
Yes.
Or if you do a biwheel and there's a lot of third house stuff, you'd want to pay attention to that.
Exactly.
For sure.
Exactly.
There's definitely
yeah.
I mean, it could be a good thing. It could be a great thing. I mean, communication is obviously one of the most important things in a relationship.
Mm.
But also, it can. How do I say? Having really good communication in a relationship can also make it easy to overlook other incompatibilities.
There you go. You can talk your way out of it.
Yeah, or you can talk you can talk yourself into believing that the relationship should work, because you communicate so well.
Right.
But then all these other things are just building up, and the incompatibility is staring you in the face, but you're getting along so well, and you're able to communicate so well that you feel like you can just kind of talk your way out of it, and maybe you can't. So
interesting. Yeah. So what do we think about Mercury then in the third house?
I mean, well, that's the natural placement, right?
That's right. This is
so much Gemini energy.
Your teacher, you've got the facts, you've got the figures.
Yeah.
We know how many carbs is on the plate and things.
Yeah.
What the poles were, and all of the facts and figures and information, and probably can talk a hole in your head, as we used to say, with knowledge, really, and stuff that they know. So, but it's a very straightforward, I think, communication if it's Mercury there, because they quite clearly can tell you what they want to say.
Yeah, it's not the boring person who gets you trapped into a corner in the party, and you're like, oh my God, he talked to me about Dogecoin this whole hour. Like, why? It's not that person. It's a person who's charming and effervescent and has little bits of knowledge that you're like, oh wow, I didn't know that. And then you go away saying, this person was so charming and
knowledgeable.
Yeah, so knowledgeable. Yeah. Not boring at all.
No.
Yeah. Venus in the third house.
Venus in the third house. I'll put my hand up to this.
Yeah.
So the writing had better look good in full colour. So I've recently got more into, yes, this is me. I've recently got more into typography, shaping text and whatnot, and writing messages, sayings to live by, I'm calling them, just in colour and artistically, so that it's not just, don't just give me Times New Roman. That isn't going to cut it.
Oh, okay. We're going there, are we? So I've got some documentaries for you.
Oh.
So first of all, art and copy. Have you seen art and copy? It's amazing. If you're into fonts now, if you're going through your font era, art and copy, look it up. It's a wonderful documentary. It's fantastic.
Did you say coffee?
Copy, yeah.
Yeah.
And also, I think it's called Helvetica.
I'm sure it is.
Yeah. There's another documentary about fonts. That's literally about, And then there's a lot of YouTube stuff that I've been watching lately because I have some time on my hands because my partner works at night a lot. Okay. So there's fonts. Boy, what could be more third house Venus fonts?
I know. It even occurred to me the other day I should create my own. I thought, who has time, Alison? But the thought went through my mind. I'll show it to you. I did a Sator square. I'm digressing, but we might. And let me just show you this artwork. I might put a picture of it actually on the podcast if I can find the thing.
I don't know if this is a third house thing, but there's also a bunch of YouTube things about flags, like the design of flags. Yeah. Which maybe it's more of a ninth house thing. Wow. Okay, so I'm looking at this font. This is amazing, audience.
So this is the Sator square, which is from Greek, right? And the idea is, what I did was, every time there's a hole in the letter, like in the O in the O or the O in the R, I'm drawing an actual face with those are actually Simon's cat's eyes. But I'll put a link below, why not? And
it's amazing.
So what you do in your spare time when you've got Venus in the 3rd house, you create fun, colourful, happy faces in letters. So, I know. So
the R is amazing. The R is he looks so dismayed.
Yes.
Oh God, I love it.
So, it's not something that
it's not for everyone, but my God, that's awesome.
That's an example of Venus in the 3rd house because it has to look good. Because I cannot do with people writing to me in Times New Roman, this other awful
Comic Sans.
Yeah. And that other one,
Papyrus.
Papyrus, yeah.
Oh, I cannot. I have some YouTube shows for you if you don't like Papyrus. That's amazing. Yeah.
So it's actually that the communication has to look good as well.
Yes.
And on proper paper and in full colour, not just the back of an envelope or the. No. My mother would write on the back of envelopes. She'd keep envelopes so she could write on the back of them. Her shopping list. I could never do. I have to have the right pen and the colour and the whole thing. So communication is even.
Do you have a printer?
I do, but it's not working. Yeah,
we have a printer, and it's we print things for like 3 apartments worth of people.
You've got to start charging.
I know, right?
Yeah.
And the other day, like now we have this.
Is it colour? I was going to ask you that.
Yeah. If you ever want anything printed, like please just send it to me. But like literally, like the guys upstairs, I'll be like, hey, can you print this? My friend from she's like in a whole different neighborhood, but she'll be like, can you print this? Like
you're the neighborhood printer.
Literally. And if she has to return something to Amazon, she's like, can you print this shipping thing for me? I'm like, yeah, sure. And of course, every time you change laptops, so now I have a new job, a new laptop, I had to print something from it. And of course, it communicates fine, but then it's like, are you out of black? I'm like, well, no, the other laptops don't think I'm out of black. And now I'm doing all the print head cleaning and the nightmare. Yeah,
is this Jupiter? Is this what we're saying? You're printing for the neighborhood?
I literally had to buy a 10-pack of the ink from Amazon a year ago. I'm like, I hope this is the last ink I ever have to buy because it is such a nightmare. And if you don't use it once a week, then it dries up and it's like, I don't know if I can print cyan anymore. I'm like, you're not out of cyan. Just do it. Yeah, it's a nightmare.
Yeah. When I was in Toronto, I had 2 printers. I got a Hewlett-Packard and a Kodak because I couldn't do with a printer that wasn't working.
Yeah.
And if this thing wasn't working, I would immediately move over to this one and call in the tech people because I can't stand it. Now I go down to Staples with my thing because my printer, I can't get the thing to work. So anyway, so that's Venus in the 3rd house.
Yeah. And so Mars in the 3rd house, which you also have.
I do.
Yeah.
Constantly churning it out.
Yeah.
I didn't used to, but I was busy in my neighborhood.
Yeah. Yeah.
When we had the children at home and that, they were always.
Were your kids very active?
I had the rule, of course, I've got many rules with the kids, but I had the rule that they had to come straight home. They weren't allowed to go to somebody else's house. So they had to come straight home and do the homework. And we had a kitchen table similar to this and a whiteboard was on the wall.
Wow.
So they got their lunch when they came in, and then we started with everybody's homework. And I started with the youngest, because I've got 4 kids. I start with the youngest kid's homework. And I'm doing it on the board, and we're following along. And how do you spell this? And how do you do that? Have you done your homework? Fine, you can go. Next, what's your homework? And the bigger kids had to sit there while I went through everybody's homework. Because yes.
Oh, my God.
I know.
Okay, and me, as a person who does not have children and has never wanted children, my mouth is dropping. That sounds absolutely exhausting.
It was.
Wow, that's insane.
But you got to do it.
No, of course you do. Yeah, I mean, you want to set them up for success.
And they're sitting there fidgeting, and the bigger kids, but eventually, because they've got so much more homework, they then are trained to, they have to come home and they have to do the homework.
Can you imagine now? Because they'd all have their own phones. Oh,
well, this is it. And, I would say,
how that would work.
Now you can go and do your thing. Because I wouldn't let them out during the week. Yeah. And it's only at weekends because it's so difficult to make sure everybody's doing everything they're supposed to be doing.
Yeah.
And then when I say, well, it's dinner at 7 and they had to be at the table because we sat down back in the day when we used to sit at tables to eat food. Yeah. And they wouldn't come down. So I just unplugged the router.
Actually, that still exists. My friend who has 2 kids, she still does that.
Yes. So the internet dies, the screaming, but they come down and sit at the table. And maybe I wouldn't do it so much today, but to get through and bring up 4 kids, it was, you have to be pretty organized. But teaching and the fact that I had the whiteboard and I was saying, okay, these are our spelling. How do you spell banana? How do you spell, cosmopolitan? And all these words they had to learn. So we went through the whole thing and they couldn't leave. The little one could go, but only the big ones had to sit there till they
in the zombie apocalypse, you could be a teacher. You're equipped.
Well, I used to work at a school, actually, but that's it. You see, we're bringing up stuff that I worked at the local school. Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, so there's Mars in the third house. I think that I had to find a way to manage it, because what happened was that if they decided when they came out of school, I'll just go to Tom's and I'll go to Mary's.
Yeah.
I didn't know where my children were.
Right.
So that's why I didn't allow it.
Yeah, exactly.
And then on a Friday, it was a case that they could have their friends over to us. And then the neighbourhood came round because we got pizza. Yeah. Which is fine. But
I would say...
I sound like a dragon mother, but...
No, you were probably like the place everyone wanted to stay on Friday night.
Well...
Yeah.
It's thinking. There was years of that, you see, but you forget. You forget.
Right, exactly. So I'm gonna go out on a limb and say the third house is your zombie apocalypse skills house.
Oh.
Because that's your neighborhood, right? Like zombie apocalypse, there's no communication, there's no internet, there's no anything like you basically it's down to, as you say, like how far can you get on a horse in a day before the horse is maybe overtaken by zombies. Don't ride your horse, in the zombie apocalypse. Like just ride a noisy motorcycle, as we've learned from Walking Dead. But anyway, this is such a digression. But yeah, so those skills that you have that you can share with your neighbors, your immediate circle of people, should you have to. Yeah. And I guess my Jupiter in the third house is because I've got that library. If the internet goes down, people are going to come to me and be like, do you have an atlas? And I'll be like, yeah, I've got an atlas.
And do you have a printer?
Yeah, I have a printer.
So there you are, listeners. If you need something printing, just ask Arwynne.
Exactly.
Wow, you should start charging for that. Interesting.
I know.
Yeah. So Jupiter, do we think we've covered that then?
Yeah.
Jupiter third, okay.
For sure.
What about Saturn then in the third house?
Yeah. And this is where we're probably going to get into not the learning disabilities, but
we're talking about the communication
style, exactly, like restricted communications.
I think so. Limited.
Maybe
these are the ones who just text one letter.
Oh, yeah.
Or an emoji, and you're supposed to know what it means,
Yeah, I mean, I've heard something about how the higher up you are in the pecking order at your job, the fewer words you need to. Yeah, and that's a thing. And then there's that whole thing of email like a man, take out all the endearments, take out all the dear and best and regards and all that stuff, and just
if it's business, yes.
Where's that thing whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's pretty straightforward, and it can be a little cold perhaps, but it would probably get the job done, I think.
Yeah.
If it's Saturn there,
Yeah, not here to make friends. Saturday, the third house, isn't here to make friends.
No, probably Times New Roman, yeah.
Yeah.
And then we've got Uranus. What about Uranus then in the third house?
Unpredictable communications. Innovative communications.
Yes. Sporadic. Yes.
Strokes of genius. Or what's the word?
And onto the latest new app, which I can't recall the name of, that someone was saying, I need to get on this now because that's not working anymore or something.
Well, gosh, I mean, there's that.
I can't keep up with it.
Yeah, there's Deep Mind thing or whatever that's just been announced, literally 2 weeks ago. Was that Deep Mind? I don't know. Deep something.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm reading a book about AI right now as well.
Okay. So you've got that, and then what about Neptune in the third house?
Yeah, that's an interesting one. Creative communications.
So this is one who comes with his guitar outside your window and serenades you. Because you can't get the words out.
Yeah.
Has that ever happened to you? No, but we live in hope, right?
No, I mean, that Say Anything scene where he's holding the boombox above his head?
Yeah.
That has happened to me.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah. It wasn't a boyfriend, and he was never going to be a boyfriend, but it was a friend who, it was when I very first moved to Baltimore for college, and we went for a walk, and then he made the very grave error of leaving me in what I would consider kind of a bad neighborhood. Looking back on it, it wasn't that bad, but at the time, I had just moved to Baltimore in the 90s, and, if anyone's seen The Wire, it was not great, for like whatever. Anyway, yeah. So he apologized by playing one of my favorite songs under my window. Wow. My roommates were all like, "What is this guy doing under the window playing this? Why am I hearing The Cure?" And I'm like, "Oh my God." So embarrassing. Wow. So yeah, I have been serenaded.
Yeah, they do get the message through somehow.
Yeah. Hilarious. So yeah, that's Neptune in the third. Yeah. Pluto in the third.
Pluto in the third.
Yeah. Ooh, like your what's his name? Rupert
Ghosted.
Murdoch. Ooh, yeah, okay. I was gonna say Rupert Murdoch, your power hungry communications moguls or whatever. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Possibly Sam Altman, but I don't know.
So is this the person that breaks up with you via text then?
Oh, yeah, maybe.
Or does everybody do that these days? I don't know.
Yeah, I wouldn't know.
No,
Thank
no.
Goodness.
But I can imagine how it can be.
Yeah, definitely. Or just maybe use a lot of skull emojis to communicate.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah.
So we've gone through, got some ideas there about some of the planets in the third house, but in general, I think the third house is not a problematic house.
No, it's not like the 8th or the 12th or anything like that. It's
yeah.
I mean, it describes you as a person. It describes your early life, your communication style. I mean, it's not. There's nothing bad that you're going to learn about yourself.
No.
Through a third house placement.
Yes.
And you're going to learn about how you communicate, how you relate to others. So you're going to want to look at things that third house planets relate to in your chart. So if you have something in the third house that's opposite something in the ninth house, that's going to be important to look at. If you have nothing in the third house, that's still okay. You're going to want to look at what's on the cusp of the third house. Right. And that's going to tell you something about your communication style. Yes. And then if you have people in your life whose planets fall in your third house, it's nothing bad. It's just going to be like, oh, okay, cool. So this person, maybe they're easy to communicate with. If they've got if their Venus or their Moon or their Mercury falls into your third house, maybe you find it super easy to talk to them. Mm-hmm. Maybe if their Saturn falls in your third house, it's like there's this very stilted communication. Or if their Pluto falls in your third house, you're like, they've opened the door to like weird transformational things that have occurred in your life. Mm. So, yeah, it's super. It's really important house, but I wouldn't say that there's nothing stressful about it.
No. And of course, if we consider when planets transit through your third house, this is likely to be the time when you find out things, when you get news, as it were, in the nature of those planets. So you're made aware of something, or short courses. Sure. If you then decide to take a short course on X, Y, Z, or whatever it is, or I don't know, what's the last short course you took? Adobe or something, and or whatever it is.
WordPress.
Oh yes.
A little while ago, like 10 years ago.
WordPress and you name it, Kit, and which I'm doing at the moment, and then even these language things that I'm just casually learning things and
casually learning Arabic.
It is. It's not a pressing learn. It's just
exactly. It's just for you.
Yeah, exactly. That's the difference. It's not that I have to. It's and there's lots of things that come up, and that's how I started really with astrology. Because when I saw the chart, I thought, "Oh, what does this mean? What are these symbols? Let me decipher this symbol."
Yeah, and if I think about it, when I first started, like in communications, I mean, I've been a writer all my life, but working in communications and actually having communications in my title. It was shortly after Pluto went into my third house. So,
And communications now in your designation at work.
Yeah, it has been since, the mid-2000s.
That's who you are, right?
100%.
Wow.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. So, transit's definitely important to look at.
They do.
Especially the slower
the outer ones, yeah. Well, anyone really.
Anything. Yeah.
When Mercury goes through, you're going to get good news or news. If you're paying attention, that's got half the battle with that, I think, as well.
Yeah, for sure.
Or, someone tells you, I saw him, and blah, blah, or I saw your mother-in-law and this and that. And you can't put two and two together until later.
Right.
But you've got the facts.
Yeah.
But,
Yeah.
So, I was a voracious reader when I was younger. We had books coming out of our ears,
Totally.
And I used to be a member of this Reader's Digest book club thing. And every month they'd send me a book.
That's cool.
And it was just non-stop. But we eventually stopped it. They don't do that sort of thing anymore. But even Well, this year, as I say, 2025, I'm trying to. The plan is 50 books this year, and we will see how far we get with that. But it can be done if you bring some focus to it.
Totally. I'm not even going to talk about how many books I read, because we know, if we're listeners of this podcast, that I listen to audiobooks, and I can go through one a week easily.
Yeah, well, seems I can too, and I had no idea that I could. So that's something that's...
I mean, if you're like, you spend any time in commuting, in your car, in public transportation,
at the gym, on the treadmill.
Exactly. Or just like waiting to fall asleep in bed, set it for 30 minutes, and there's a chapter. Yeah. All
right. Okay, so we've spoken about the third house. We've given you some ideas about themes on the third house. We've given you some ideas about planets when they are found in the third house. And so if you found value in this episode, please do consider sharing it with anybody who would be interested. Make sure you're getting our newsletter, and you can sign up at starzology.com/newsletter. And also doubly make sure that you're following Arwynne and getting her newsletter. And she is at...
I'm at www.mspink.net, and it's mspink.net. And I am sending out a weekly newsletter every Saturday. And I'm blogging about art and books and culture and society and some history and some nostalgia and whatever.
Yeah. Arwynne's quite prolific, so make sure you don't miss that.
Thanks.
So Arwynne, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you. This has been great. I love the third house.
It's been lovely having you.
Yeah.
And thanks so much to our listeners.
Yes. And we will see you next time.
We'll see you next time. Thanks so much for getting this far through the episode. I just want to take a moment to tell you about the two main options of my astrology services. So the first one is coaching. If you are an aspiring astrologer, and by that I mean someone who's perhaps a hobbyist astrologer, or someone who's learning astrology, or a student, or you've got a few books and you've been doing it for a while, but perhaps you need a little bit of help to bring it all together, then maybe getting some astrological coaching from me would be the answer for you. The astrology coaching I offer is a 1-hour session on Zoom, and it's tailored to answer your particular questions. For example, if you have issues with natal chart readings, we can go there. Or if you're having problems working with your forecasting, we can go there. Or even basic astrology stuff, or even getting yourself organized for your astrology business. The idea is that astrological coaching will answer your particular questions. It's tailored specifically to you and where you are in your astrological journey. And I'm happy to help you out with some guidance about how you can get going, what to focus on, and what to dismiss. So that would be the astrological coaching for people trying to learn astrology. The second astrological service I offer is consultations. So this is for someone who perhaps doesn't know anything about astrology, but they just want to have their chart read or get their chart done. Call it what you will. So once more, this is a 1-hour consultation over Zoom. I will interpret your chart, tell you about the main features, tell you about where the energy is flowing, and all the rest of what is entailed in a thorough natal chart interpretation. I can also add in some forecasting in there too, bearing in mind we only have 1 hour. So just in summary, I've got coaching for people who want to learn astrology, and I've got consultations for those who want to get an astrology reading done. I'm Alison Price from Starzology.com. Thank you so much for listening. We'll see you next time.